Now, from the Signature Bank Studios.
Insert Democrat socialist here.
Runs the Democratic House floor for 30 plus years running. He's promising this and he's stealing that. Where can you get that kind of money? He's using your house like his own piggy bank. You ought to know by now. You can pay off your house here in Illinois, but you can never keep up with the taxes. Oh, how it's always been the plan to have a taxpayer pay, no doubt. Not a matter of if anymore, but when. You're moving out. I said, when you're moving out.
Top of the morning, Dan Proft. Theme music means it's time for our weekly conversation with Ted Dabrowski, formerly of wirepoints.org. All things Illinois policy related now, of course, as you know, if you listen to the show. He's a Republican candidate for governor. Ted, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Good morning, Dan. How are you?
Good. So I talked about this a bit earlier in the program, and you just heard Jeannie Ives' commentary on it. She mentioned you and her back in the day, and Harvey trying to send the signal that this was a community in serious financial distress, which they finally conceded, such distress that they can't pay their bills last week. The firefighter pension fund in Harvey has 18 cents for every dollar it needs to pay its liabilities, which total $58 million. The city has laid off about half of its public safety workforce in recent years to keep the plate spinning. The residents of Harvey pay some of the highest property tax rates in the country, 4.7% on their homes, essentially 4.7% of home value is the property tax bill. I mean, that's, you know...
It's crazy. It's crazy.
That's, I think, like almost 4x what the average rate is in Illinois. And, of course, Harvey only collects half of what it levies because very few residents of Harvey can afford to pay 4.7% of home value, which is basically zero because of that property tax rate. So here we go. The question, I suppose, is, does this represent a canary in the coal mine? Are there more to follow? And if so, what is the state going to do about it that Harvey couldn't do about it?
Well, yeah, let's just jump back 7 years ago when Jeannie and I both held a press conference there. And, you know, this is all pre-COVID. So this is all before the bailouts came, and that's the only reason it got quiet for a few years, because all those bailouts during COVID. You know, I went down there and I met a young man right after Jeannie and I spoke, and I met a young man whose parents had already fled their home and went to Mississippi. So he was still here in that house, and he said his parents were trying to sell the house for $35,000. And I said, wow, that's really low. And he goes, no, it's much lower than that. He says, I don't think we'll get $7,000 for it. And, you know, at the time, nobody could, you know, I mean, these houses were being sold for $12,000, for $5,000, for $7,000. It sounded like a used car lot. And I wrote about that. Now, of course, with all that, you know, COVID money that's come in, things are inflated a bit. But the problem never left. And, you know, the situation is that cities like these, and, you know, you get the big cities in the rest of the state that are going to be in a similar position. They're going to have to choose between keeping active police and fire or funding the pensions of their retired police and fire, but they won't be able to do both. And that's the scary part of what's happening to a place like Harvey. And I might remind you that 18% funded level in the Harvey public safety, that's what Chicago's is. So Chicago's public safety funds are just as broke. Chicago, of course, has more money than Harvey, but this is an omen of how bad things. Yes, Harvey is a mess. It's always been a mess, but it kind of shows you what kind of mess most cities in Illinois are in, just not as bad.
Well, okay, but so, I mean, right, so maybe nobody is going to fall off the edge like Harvey did immediately, but what exactly can the state really do? As was pointed out, I mean, they didn't do anything for East St. Louis when they took over East St. Louis's finances. This was pointed out by Austin Berg. I mean, East St. Louis is still in catastrophic financial shape more than 2 decades after they had, the state advisory group come in and manage the finances of that city. So, the state legislature is not going to do any better job than the local officials because structural change is what's needed, not just, managing the store a little bit better.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So I think, when you start looking at structural change, this is where we need to get to. And this is, Governor Pritzker, he said that, pension reform is a fantasy. Is exactly what he said. Forget about doing it. He says, the pension protection clause is there. So not true. There's a lot we can do and a lot that's been done across the country. We've seen states across the country reform pensions. That's the starting point, of course, but there's much more than that. But, it starts, I think, with just going to 401ks tomorrow for all new government workers. We got to stop adding pensions and pension debts to the mess. So starting tomorrow, it's constitutional, it's legal. We could do 401ks for all workers going forward. Now, that doesn't solve all the debt problems. It just stops creating new pensions. Then after that, we have to attack everything that's raising property taxes. And you've got all these mandates and all this growth. I was just looking at CPS, for example, and their property taxes. They added, so in the time that since Pritzker took office, CPS has shrunk 37,000 in enrollment in the schools, and yet staffing has increased by over 9,000. So 37,000 shrinkage in enrollment, 9,000 increase in staffing, and most of it, 70% of it is not teachers, it's staff and administration. And so when you get that kind of bloat, and it happens everywhere, it happens all over the state, that's what keeps pushing up taxes.
And Stacey Davis Gates, speaking of Chicago Teachers Union, or Chicago Public Schools, which then you have to address the Chicago Teachers Union since they run the schools. She just got a promotion. Now she's not just the boss at the CTU. She's the boss of all the teachers in Illinois. She's the head of the Illinois Federation of Teachers, too. So she's going to export the great success that she has brought to Chicago statewide. Yeah,
I mean, that's the craziness. The whole destruction of Chicago public schools, largely driven by the Chicago Teachers Union. They will export that power, that same, I don't know what you want to call it, crazy power to the rest of the state. And, I think many school districts downstate certainly won't want that kind of stuff. So it'll be a real interesting thing. But of course, they'll take higher salaries and all the stuff that comes with what, Gates has brought. But it's chaos that she's bringing. And we see that in the schools that are, practically empty but still running. We see that in the collapse in reading levels and math levels. We see that in the schools where not a single kid can read at grade level. That's the kind of stuff that she defends because she only cares about pay and benefits and power, not about actual reading and math.
Well, what should suburban families be thinking about Stacey Davis Gates' new role at IFT?
I think,
what would the impact be on at Maine East and Fremd and Hinsdale Central?
Well, it will only be negative. It will only be negative because, all you have to do is look at her words. With what she supports with regard to DEI, everything's racist. I just think that the confrontation between the unions and the parents will continue to grow all over the state now if she keeps her power. And I think everybody in the suburbs should do everything they can to get her out of power. But it's going to get ugly. And I think this is the only thing we can keep fighting for is school choice at some point, and homeschooling, of course, because I think that's the ultimate power for any parent, whether they live in South Side of Chicago or in the suburbs. They have to be able to take their kids out and go somewhere else if the system, if the forced system is going to fail them. So we got to get to vouchers and things like that, which Iowa has, which Indiana has, which Ohio has, which Arizona has. We got to get to that.
Yesterday, the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals, not exactly a bastion of conservatism. It's not as leftist as it used to be, but it's still left. They ruled in favor of the Trump administration that he can deploy the National Guard to Portland. Now, they haven't allowed yet to lift the TRO that allows him to actually. He can stage them in Portland, but he hasn't been allowed yet to deploy them on the streets of Portland. Sort of the same situation in Illinois. They're allowed to be staged at this facility training center in Elwood in Will County, but not yet deployed to, say, the ICE facility in Broadview. It seems to me, with all due respect to my friend Professor Richard Epstein over at University of Chicago, that the administration is going to win this with respect to the presidential powers as it pertains to the National Guard for the purposes of enforcing federal law when you are not getting cooperation. In fact, you're getting open antagonism and hostility from the locals, both in Portland and Chicago. What is your view on that? Do you want to borrow a favorite phrase, an all of government, where its willing approach to the enforcement of federal immigration law and the removal of people residing in Illinois illegally?
Yeah, and I might answer the same way I would answer the previous question we just talked about, which is I would strongly support school choice and fight for school choice and fight for more homeschooling as governor, because Pritzker won't. And the same thing here. It's on the whole crime and reduction of illegal immigration and these criminals that are here. As governor, I would openly work with the federal authorities to do everything we can to reduce violence here. We know how violent the city of Chicago has been, and so we would work with that. But yeah, I think my guess is he'll get those powers because he's fighting against a state that is fomenting, in Pritzker in particular, fomenting violence against federal law enforcement. So I would think he would get it, but I think the real issue is that Pritzker is the one doing all the fomenting. He's the one cheerleading the violence, or at least the violent actions against ICE and the Fed. So
all of this, the labeling of ICE and the suggestions that ICE is some sort of terrorist organization. If you or I were doing that in the direction of to targeting some group of people, and then violence was visited upon that group of people, there would be a hue and cry. And yet that's exactly what's happened. It's not just fomenting in the abstract. It's actually happened. You have, cars ramming ICE agents, and we've seen the boorish and violent behavior outside the ICE facility in Broadview, as well as on the streets of Chicago. So it means that's happening. You have ICE officers who have been faced with lethal violence. Fortunately, none have been killed or seriously harmed in Chicago, but they've been faced with it. And I just think that requires a strong and relentless rebuke.
Well, I think it's grounds for removal from office. Frankly, I think that kind of behavior, like you said, in normal times, and I guess maybe if we pop back a decade, would never be allowed. And I think a guy like Pritzker would be kicked out of office for that. But here he gets to effectively dox federal law enforcement, and we're talking about federal law enforcement that's going after violent criminals. And these are violent criminals that Pritzker could have handed over if he were partnering and really getting rid of crime. He would just hand over people in handcuffs right to the feds. But he does the opposite. Not only do they get released, and then forces the federal law enforcement to go chase those bad guys down, which creates risk for the federal law enforcement, for local enforcement, for the bad guys, for the victims. It creates a mess. But Pritzker's getting away with it, and it's to hear our leader, our governor, speak that way. For me, it's really a grounds for removal. But I guess we're gonna have to do it the old-fashioned way.
You much of a gambler? You much of a gambler, Ted?
I'm not a gambler. I'm not very good at it, and I don't do it.
You don't like to play cards?
It's fun, but I'm not very good at it, so I don't do it.
No, I mean
I lose too. Yeah, I'd lose too much. So
but have you ever played blackjack?
Sure, a couple times.
Ever go on a heater like Pritzker did in Vegas? We're supposed to believe.
No heater. No.
1.4 million. I saw that you're going to talk about that run that Pritzker had at the tables a little bit later this morning. Any preview for us?
Well, yeah. I mean, it's fascinating. People, I think, we're quite shocked. We know that he's a billionaire. We know he makes lots of money He doesn't report a lot of the money that's made because it's all in like trust funds, and we don't really know what happens. But he does report some earnings, so he doesn't look like he's hiding everything. So he reported $10.7 million in income for 2024. He's worth $3.9 billion. But in there was this $1.4 million in gambling winnings, and that of course raised the eyebrows of lots of people saying, "What the heck is that? Why is a governor reporting that?" And I initially thought it was like earnings from companies he owns. But no, it was him sitting down at the table, and it's raised a lot of questions. How the heck did he make that much money? Where was he? Who was he with? Do people know the true story? And that's one big set of questions. But the other thing for me is, man, a guy that can sit down and make $1.4 million in earnings on gambling is so removed from everyday Illinois and the pummeling they're taking living here with wage problems that we have, with the job problems that we have, with the property taxes that we have. It's like, this guy is totally divorced from reality, from what everyday Illinoisans are facing.
Well, the other thing that his spokeshuman said is that that was a $1.4 million in gambling winnings against gambling losses, because you can write those off. If you report the winnings, you can write off the lose. So where else are you playing? How much in total did you win? How much in total did you lose? I mean, lots of questions. I know he's going to say, because they already have. Well, he's going to donate the $1.4 million to charity. All of a sudden, yeah, right. When it's under scrutiny and he wants it to go away, he's going to donate it to charity. All right. Well, very good. For more information on Ted's campaign, tedforillinois.com is the website. Ted Dabrowski, Republican candidate for governor. Thanks as always. Appreciate it.
Thank you, Dan.
And he joined us on the Turnkey.pro answer line.
Hear about the big stories of the day, then talk about them.